What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Peanut Gallery Podcast, episode 31. Seth, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Good to be back home,
from vacation.
My studio.
Yes. You totally have a studio. We're about to have a studio, actually.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome because you're moving up here.
Shout out to all the fathers out there because it's Father's Day.
Well, it is Father's Day at the time of this recording. And I prefer to say Guardian Day, because you might be a father, you might be a mother.
I think Father's Day is sexist, so.
Yeah, or Happy Gender Nonconformative Day because we don't really want to trigger anyone out there. So, but no, in all seriousness, Happy Father's Day. You guys are awesome. We need you now more than ever. So don't abandon your child and be a piece of crap. Be a father.
Wow, that got real.
Listen, I'm just saying, man.
Jeez.
I am ticked off about all that stuff. Okay. I truly believe that fatherhood is very important.
Do you want to talk about it?
I do want to talk about it, but I feel like the introduction is maybe not the time, but I'm going to say something anyways because fatherhood is very important, all right? So you need to stay with your children and not go knock up a chick and then leave her.
Spoken as someone who obviously you're a father, right?
Well, I say this out of experience and things, No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, a family that stays together is happy. I read that, and it didn't rhyme, so it's true. All right. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And this is the Peanut Gallery Podcast, guys. If you didn't already know, this is the place that we provide our completely unprofessional and insignificant opinions about the most important and significant topics of the day. I'm your host, Jared, and with me, as always, is Seth, and we're going to jump right into what was nuts this week. All right, guys, we are back, and we're going to move right into what was nuts this week. And this last story happened a little bit later or earlier in the week last week, but I want to talk about it because I think it's really important. It's the story with, of course, the Megyn Kelly and Alex Jones kind of debacle. Megyn Kelly announced that NBC was going to be doing an interview as her interviewing Alex Jones, and this preview of the interview kind of released, and a lot of outrage ensued after it, and here's a clip of that.
Now.
They call you the most paranoid man in America. Is that true?
Absolutely not. A paranoid person will be hiding out in their house, not venturing out in public. I go out there on the street and battle Black Lives Matter, the communists at point blank range.
We talked controversies and conspiracies.
9/11.
Now, 9/11 was an inside job, but when I say inside job, it means criminal elements in our government working with Saudi Arabia and others wanted to frame Iraq for it. Just a fact.
Sandy Hook.
Well, Sandy Hook's complex because I've had debates where devil's advocates said the whole story's true, and then I've had debates where I've said that none of it's true.
When you say parents faked their children's death, people get very angry.
Yeah, well, I know, but they don't get angry about the 500,000 dead Iraqis from the sanctions, or they don't get angry about all the illegals.
That's a dodge.
No, it's not a dodge. The media never covers all the evil wars it's promoted, all the big things.
That doesn't excuse what you did and said about Newtown. You know it.
Here's the difference. I looked at all the angles of Newtown, and I made my statements long before the media even picked up on it. We didn't get any of the really important stuff.
What do you mean? We talked about all the important stuff.
Well, here's the big one they always make fun of me. You probably want to throw this in there. 30 years ago, they began creating animal-human hybrids. Isn't that the big story, Megyn Kelly?
All right, so for those of you who aren't really familiar with Alex Jones and InfoWars, Alex Jones is the founder of Infowars.com. He's kind of known as definitely a conspiracy theorist. If you didn't already see that through the previews, if you've done any research on him at all, you would kind of know that. He's a guy who thinks that the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting was all a hoax and that the parents who were crying on tape because of the loss of their children, he said that they were just actors. He believes that 9/11 is an inside job. He doesn't believe in the Boston Marathon bombings or in the Orlando gay nightclub shooting. So he kind of denies a lot of things. In addition, he said that the government is using chemicals to encourage homosexuality in children. So that's a little interesting. I think we need to be looking into that. And then also the animal-human hybrid breeding, which is going on for 30 years.
Yeah.
But, so anyways, people are kind of outraged about Megyn Kelly apparently giving him a platform is what a lot of this is. The outrage behind it is.
That's where I get confused on, like, where is this outrage? Like, what's the reason for the outrage? Because I understand what he says are outrageous, but it's what he does, and I it's not like it's anything new. And it has seemed like a lot of the outrage that not only, I mean, there's been some towards him when more people have been enlightened to his different views on certain events, but there's also been a lot of outrage directed at Megyn Kelly, and I'm struggling very hard to try to figure out why.
Yeah, and it's not like this guy is just some kind of, little YouTube guy who has maybe a couple hundred thousand subscribers or whatever it is. I mean, InfoWars gets traffic of tens of millions of people every single month visit Infowars.com. And on YouTube, he has a
like
couple
2 million
million different
subs, I think,
yeah, he has like 2 million different subs, and I mean, he has a platform. So
Well,
Megyn Kelly,
he's a little bit bigger than us.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's bigger.
Like about the same.
Comparable.
So he's like on the same level as us.
Exactly.
But, no, but like it's weird.
This is someone who President Trump was on his program in 2015 during the election cycle. I know he's campaigning and stuff, but it's not Megyn Kelly giving him a platform. He already had a platform. He has a platform, a pretty big, substantial platform already.
Right. And this has kind of become also, I think, a controversy because you've also seen Alex Jones come out now, and he's released pre-interview recordings, which I didn't know that was a thing. But it's like apparently like she called him asking if he would be on the interview, and they kind of went over what they would go over. He claims that she wouldn't ask about Sandy Hook, and that when they were talking on the phone, that like you can hear her saying that this isn't going to be like a gotcha moment, and she's not trying to have him on for it to be a hit piece.
Yeah.
But I
honestly don't understand how if she said, "Hey, I'm not going to question you at all about the Sandy Hook things," then I mean, that's fine. She probably shouldn't bring it up. I think it's weird that there's something that's so off limits that he just doesn't want anyone to question him about because he knows his views are so ridiculous on the subject. He's like, don't ask me about it because I don't want to have to answer, and then for what I think to actually be out there. That seems a little strange to me, honestly.
And if you go by what she says also in the interview, that she kind of just wants it to be just kind of wants to talk to him about these different ideas that he has, I think that's great. I mean, this guy says some crazy things, but I don't think that he should be like silenced because of it. You should let him speak. And let him hang himself, with kind of his outrages. I'd love to talk to him and kind of, because he says like he's researched it thoroughly and he's come to the conclusion that these things were fake. I'd love to see what he researched. What the heck did you research and find out that convinced you that these were fake? Because I think that's fascinating. Even because I'm like it would boggle my mind if these.
What did you find that nobody else found? Please share.
Right. Or yeah. I mean, because I think that he really I don't think it's an act for him. It seems like he really thinks that these things are fake. He also does seem a little bit hyperbolic with his character. Seems just kind of to incite discord.
A little explosive for sure to kind of attract viewership. But he's got, I mean, like we said, he's got a big platform, and I know people personally who, watch his stuff and like a good bit of his stuff and content that he puts out. And it's not that InfoWars in itself is completely wrong, just like CNN isn't completely wrong all the time. There's truthful articles that they put out and stuff. But you really have to question.
The Wall Street Journal is wrong all the time.
Exactly. But what I was going to say, you really have to question really the legitimacy of a source like this when you have, the founder of it or the lead spokesman of it who holds these views and stuff like that. Right.
And I think as of right now, the interview is still planned because there's also calls for this interview to not be published. Like this was her first.
He's released the whole interview already, right?
He has on his YouTube channel, and I think she's still going forward, or it might be it already happened. I'm not totally sure the timeline on this.
Yeah.
But because it was kind of just like, of course they should release the interview. I don't understand why they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like it's bizarre to me that people are calling for this to not happen. It's like I don't understand that.
And even if you are, because I know there were reports coming out that parents of the Sandy Hook tragedy were writing letters to Megyn Kelly saying, "Don't give this man the time of day. Don't, do an interview with him. Don't air the interview." But it's like I can't even imagine what you're going through. I know that, but I would feel like if there's somebody crazy out there saying these things, I would want a credible news source or at least someone to go and interview him and for him to be exposed for what he is to the American people, to then discredit that. I mean, like I said, I'm not in their situation at all, but I obviously think it's definitely always better to shine a light on things and to give people a voice to speak. And then, if they hang themselves, then that's fine. If they make some credible, valid points, and you might want to look into them more, then that's fine too. But I always err on that side. I think that's always better in the end.
I agree.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we have the Congressional baseball shooting just happened. This happened about midweek last week. I think it was on a Wednesday.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was on a Wednesday. What this is there's a congressional baseball game that happens every year, and it's a fundraiser. I think last year they raised around $600,000, but it's the Congress, so the Senate and the House of Representatives come together. It's a bipartisan event, and they play a game, the Republicans versus the Democrats, to try and raise money for charity. Anyways, a man by the name of James T. Hodgkinson, came, and he came down to the dugouts of the baseball field where the Republicans were practicing. There's reports that he came up to Republicans that were practicing there beforehand and asked them if this was the Republicans or the Democrats practicing here, and they answered the Republicans. He later then got an AR-15 and came down into the dugouts and then began to open fire on the representatives that were playing there. He wounded a total of 4 people. One of them was Steve Scalise, who is the House Majority Whip. And if you don't know what that is, he's basically the person, if you've ever seen House of Cards or anything like that, he's got the map out of Congress, and he's counting the votes and figuring out if legislation is going to pass if they have the support for it. So he had a security detail of police that were there. And when the shooter opened fire, he shot Steve Scalise in the hip. And then he also shot another congressional staffer and then the 2 police officers who were with him. He wounded both of them, but they were still able to shoot and mortally wound the shooter at the time. It's confirmed now he's died. So a lot of people were kind of trying to find out a motive and stuff like that. And if you look at Steve Scalise's, or I'm sorry, not Steve Scalise, James T. Hodgkin's Facebook page and kind of what he's done in the past, it came out that he was a devout Bernie Sanders supporter, that he actually volunteered at Bernie Sanders' presidential run. He volunteered at during Bernie Sanders' campaigns, is what I'm trying to say. And when Bernie Sanders found this out, he did a response, he made a speech, and this is what he had to say.
Madam President, I have just been informed that the alleged shooter at the Republican baseball practice this morning is someone who apparently volunteered on my presidential campaign. I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms. Real change can only come about through nonviolent action, and anything else runs counter to our most deeply held American values. I know I speak for the entire country in saying that my hopes and prayers are that Representative Scalise, congressional staff, and the Capitol police officers who were wounded make a quick and full recovery. I also want to thank the Capitol Police for their heroic actions to prevent further harm. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, so I think that Bernie Sanders, rightly so, condemned the actions of this man. Obviously, he did. And I want to be careful here because it's not smart at all to say that this is Bernie Sanders' fault by any means. This man is obviously very mentally unstable. And it's not the fact that he was a left-wing Democrat or anything like that that made him go and do these shootings. It's the fact that he was just a crazy person and a total loon that did this.
Right. Just like when someone that supported Trump in the election did something horrible, that all Trump supporters aren't bad. But I don't think it's definitely not right to label Bernie supporters as these people that want to go just open fire on congressmen. But it was like, I couldn't imagine. I mean, you heard, I watched this interview of one of them, I don't know who it was, retelling the story and talking about how, like, as soon as it started firing, they're like, was that a gun? And they saw Steve drop in the outfield. And then they all ran to the other dugout, and like they saw him crawling. And they were saying, like, if he didn't have his security detail, they would have just been fish in a barrel.
Yeah, Rand Paul said that he thinks
scary.
that they would have all been dead if those people hadn't have been there. And the only reason they were there is because Steve Scalise is the House Majority Whip. If he hadn't been there wouldn't have been any security detail at all, and you could have had, multiple dead congressmen. That would have been a huge event in American history. But yeah, we're gonna kind of use this story kind of as a jumping off point for our main topic that we're gonna talk about. But we don't believe that campaign rhetoric and stuff like that, political rhetoric, is necessarily correlated with violent acts. But like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the main topic. But we wanted to mention the story because it's a big piece of news, and thank God that nobody was killed aside from the piece of trash who committed these heinous acts.
Yes.
Seth, what's the next story?
So the next one is actually kind of interesting. That I thought was interesting. I threw it in here. Was a new poll has come forward. And I love how, like, we're talking about polls still. I mean, we understand that I think they're kind of garbage and inaccurate. But just interesting because I think you can still kind of get a little bit of a pulse on the American people. And that this is a poll that has come out from the Associated Press and the University of Chicago, their Center for Public Affairs. And 61% of Americans think that Donald Trump tried to impede or, physically obstructed justice in the FBI investigation into his campaign. Like, that's an alarm. I think that's an alarming amount based on the information we currently have.
Yeah.
I do not understand these people that think that he actually did this.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can kind of point to is the freaking media basically brainwashing people into thinking this, because there is just not the information available yet to make this decision.
Absolutely. If the only information that we have is what came out, then
which it is
right now, then there's no way that he just didn't obstruct justice if you look at it from a legal standpoint. And it's interesting, the media, all these people, they've never given a clear definition of obstruction of justice.
Right.
So I want to go ahead and do that really quick now, just so that before you make, you draw your own conclusions or your own opinions about it, that you actually know what the definition of it is. So obstruction of justice is defined as the omnibus clause of 18 U.S.C. section 1503, which provides that, quote, whoever corruptly or by threatens by force or by any threatening letter or communication influences, obstructs, or impedes or endeavors to influence, obstruct, or impede the due administration of justice shall be guilty of an offense. So the main thing to pull out of that is someone who threatens by force or a threatening letter of communication influences or obstructs. So you could make the argument that Trump influenced it, but he didn't influence it at all because James Comey did not act on the, quote, wishes or hopes of President Trump, right? And so if President Trump had used his power in the executive to force Comey to not continue the investigation into Michael Flynn, then you could say, obviously, he used by threat, by force, he stopped the investigation. But there was no actual action that Comey took on the matter, so therefore justice was not obstructed in any way. So
right. And so this was just, to me, I was like, this is kind of scary that this many people are on board for this. Basically, I mean, if you think that the president has obstructed justice, I would just assume you'd be for, like, impeaching him, conviction done. And it's like, people are jumping the gun, I think, on this, and I don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just important to actually understand the definition before you throw out words like obstruction of justice and what that really means and what it entails, because it's a serious offense, really. Yeah. So you need to understand
it's just like throwing
what
out
it
words
means.
like racist and stuff. It's like you need to understand that you don't just throw these words out.
Well, words have no bearing anymore.
Basically. And lastly, wanted to do a little bit of an update on the Evergreen University situation. We talked about this in our Expose Evergreen video you guys can check out. We did a couple weeks ago. And basically it's just this college is going nuts about this professor that didn't want... Anyway, it's basically anarchy on campus right now. And in a Facebook post, actually, a couple students posted and were saying that they're feeling upset that professors and students have been spreading lies and threats to try to control the behavior of students, and because of that, there's this like pro-Trump group called Patriot Prayer that was coming to the campus to kind of, I don't know if they were going to protest it or they were going to try to like protect the students. It's a little bit unclear, but as a response, a local, or I don't know if it was local, another group called the Puget Sound Anarchists asked for support in order to quote what they said that they were there to quote oppose the Patriot Prayer rally at Evergreen and drown out, embarrass, and expose them as the bigoted, pathetic fools that they are. So you had this like pro-Trump people that were coming to help these students that were saying that they were being controlled by lies and threats and stuff, and then this anarchist group that was like, well, we can't let them on campus, we're gonna go there to oppose them, and like this like battle almost ensued. I don't know if it got too violent, but it was like these two forces, and you can see in videos that we're going to show on screen as we're talking, like people were basically on edge the whole time. And luckily, there was only one arrest. Ironically, it was from the anti-fascist group that pulled out a knife, that actually pulled out a weapon, and people from the Patriotic Prayer group like beat the crap out of him, took him down until the cops came, which is awesome and kind of ironic. And it's one of those things like, so the news cycle happens, and what we talk about one week we forget about the next because the next big thing pops up. But I think it's important to, these things are still happening, and it's important
staying
to
up to date,
stay relevant in your minds that this is not fixed on this campus. It's still absolute crazy town over there.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. And actually, the leader of the Patriot Prayer group, said that his group has been labeled white supremacist by the anti-fascists because anybody that's not them is a white supremacist, obviously.
Exactly.
And what he had to say about it was actually really fascinating. What he said is, I quote, "I love all people because they're human. It doesn't matter what the color of their skin is, okay? And I'm sick of hearing about that. If we're white supremacists, why do we have more people of color rolling with us than they do? That's what I want to understand." And it's this disconnect from reality that he's talking about, on how they're just called white supremacists without any reason, and then people hear that, associate the two, and then think that this group is a white supremacist group, when I haven't looked at the people, but most of the fascist people, anti-fascist people, hide behind masks because they're cowards, so we don't know what they are. But a lot of them we've seen on campus, like we've seen a lot of white students defending like these minority groups, and it's like, these labels that you're applying to people without any thought, white supremacist, racist, like it's insane that there's no basis
in reality, no facts to back it up.
Right.
It's crazy. You
can't
can't
play.
Yeah, it's totally a big play, and you can't. I mean, when you look at the quote that Joey Gibson said, I mean, that's perfectly rational, perfectly reasonable, and you can't put any kind of. It's like you almost can't approach it with a sound mind because you can't think through it rationally. You can't think through why they're called white supremacists, because they're just clearly not. So I mean,
yeah, this guy that says it doesn't matter what the color of their skin is, okay? Like that's a white supremacist.
Yeah.
Like maybe you could say, oh, he's lying, but I don't think a white supremacist would lie about that. They would.
But
just
the
be
people
like,
who forced,
no, I love white people.
But the people who forced the white students or white teachers to leave the campus, are totally fine. They're the anti-fascists. Yeah, it's insane.
It's completely backwards, and I just whatever.
So yeah, anyways, be sure and stay on top of that story because, like we said, just because another week passes doesn't mean that the crazy story we talked about last week is resolved in any ways, because most of the time, unfortunately, it's not. But anyways, guys, that is going to wrap up what was nuts this week, and we're going to move right into the main topic. All right, guys, we are back in the main topic this week, and what I kind of want to talk about, like we said from the What Was Nuts section, is political discourse or rhetoric getting too harsh and leading to violence. So I kind of want to piggyback off the story from the Congressional baseball shooting. Is certain rhetoric that was said during the campaign on both sides of the aisle leading to these violent acts, these heinous acts that are committed. After something like this happens, both the Republicans and the Democrats always come together and talk about unity and all that kind of stuff. Here's a little clip of Speaker of the House Paul Ryan doing just that.
We are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
And then in addition to that, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi did their first ever joint interview at the baseball fields where the game was being played. So here's another clip of that.
How do you balance letting Republicans in your caucus speak their minds while also setting a role, being a role model and saying that's too far, you've gone too far, don't say that, which happens sometimes in both your caucuses.
Well, sure, but I think all of us have a responsibility to watch our rhetoric, but we're passionate. We believe passionately about our causes, about our issues, and we can do that without being vitriolic, without fomenting the kind of anger that's out there in the country. So that's what leaders do, and that's what members of Congress have incumbent upon them to have the responsibility to do that. Sure, there is rhetoric on both sides of the aisle that goes too far, and it's our job to help make sure that it doesn't go too far, but that it's still passionate. And that's just basically the tone that we're trying to set.
It sucks that it has to be a tragedy that brings these freaking two sides together. Like, they act like children, like they're not on the same team when we should all be here for America, like they said now. And I think in a week
After
they're going to go back to demonizing the other side.
A week is that is optimistic, my friend. I think it is already completely done. But no, it was definitely refreshing talk, and like you said, it's a shame that it has to be a tragedy that brings it together, and it never lasts long. But out of response of the shooting that happened, the Atlantic wrote an article. It's called "The Blurry Line Between Violent Talk and Violent Action." We're gonna link the article in the description. You can go there and check it out. But basically, the article was written in response to the shooting, and the article talks a lot about a study by Nathan Calmo. He's a professor of communication at Louisiana State. And what he did is he published a study that he was doing in 2014 talking about the differences in how wording affects aggression in people. Basically his research and the studies that he did took different political statements. It was all hypotheticals, and they tested aggression levels of the people who heard them. So say, for instance, if a political leader said, "Will you help me win this battle?" Okay, talking about during an election cycle versus, "Will you help me win this race?" Or "We must fight so that our side prevails," or something like that. Versus, "Will you elect me so that my legislation will come through or my policies will be presented?" Something like that. And his study basically showed that aggression levels in people were substantially raised. I think it was doubled when you have words like fight and war thrown into political rhetoric. Now, I mean, this is a hypothetical discussion, and I mean, those things trigger stimuli in brain anyways to do those things. But I think it's interesting because if you look at the correlation of the shooter, James Hodgkin's Facebook page, he was a group and a member, or he was a group on a Facebook page called Terminate the Republicans. And obviously he tried to do that. But I was basically, what are your thoughts? Use this as a jumping off point. Does political rhetoric influence violent action in people?
I would have to say absolutely. I think words are incredibly powerful. Especially how you word things, and not only the words, but the way they're said. Like, what's that called? I don't know. Like the way the words are said. The
way they're presented?
Yeah, not only the present, just like the attitude. What's that? There's a word for that.
Persona behind them.
I'll probably think of it later.
Okay.
What?
The persona behind what the words,
no, it's not
what
persona.
you're meaning. Okay.
It doesn't matter. But no, I think words are really powerful. And I do think that you can there's examples all throughout history, and especially just recently, that this is totally true. I mean, there's a reason that climate change deniers has caught hold when it's kind of a ridiculous claim. They're not denying climate change necessarily. They might just be denying parts of it, but they're able to lump them together, put them in this group. The word denier makes them feel like they don't believe it at all, and then it kind of changes the whole conversation. You've seen it with like all these labels people have put on, like Islamophobia. I mean, if people just said, "Oh, this person maybe thinks there could be something wrong with Islam. Maybe there's some kind of violent part of Islam that we need to address." Well, that's not as enticing to the majority of people as saying, oh, they're Islamophobic, you know?
Yeah.
Like, these words have power in the way that they're used. And I don't think there'd be a way to deny that. But and I also think that's why it's very important to protect free speech, because it's one of our greatest freedoms is to say things how we want to say them, but we also just need to be aware of how we say them and how it's perceived by everybody else. You know?
Yeah.
It's one of those, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, with the ability to say whatever we want, we need to be very careful with what we say and how we say it, so that we don't water down words, which we've already managed to do with Nazi, Islamophobic, all these words, white supremacist, these words that should carry weight.
Yeah.
And they don't anymore because they have been abused.
Yeah, because you hear them like every 5 seconds, someone's racist or someone's Islamophobic.
Podcast, and I don't think we would have joked about them 20 years ago. Maybe we would have, but it wouldn't have been as widely accepted.
Yeah.
But what about you, man? I mean, do you think words are important?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think words are important, and I don't think neither one of us are advocating that any of this speech be regulated legally by any means, unless it specifically incites violence by saying, "Hey, be
unless
violent."
you're like, you go kill him.
Yeah,
like, I'll
exactly.
pay someone to kill this person.
But I think there's definitely a moral kind of obligation that people have to not, use these inflammatory words when they're not needed at all, and when they don't accomplish any specific purpose other than throwing red meat out there for people to go chew on and chase after. And I think that people, especially, I think it's dramatically risen just in the last political election cycle. I think it had always been there, but it's kind of gone to a new level, especially with everything going on with social media. Everybody has an outlet to say whatever they want, and there's basically no repercussions for that. You have different political leaders on both sides, being fairly vitriolic with the language and the rhetoric that they use towards the other side. And I'm not saying I don't want it's a fine line, because I don't want to be the word police or anything like that. And I strongly, strongly believe that people are responsible for their own actions. So even if I said, hey, go kill that person, and that person went and killed them, it is still 100% their fault for doing so. I may be charged for trying to influence them, but I believe that a person is in 100% control of their own actions. Okay. So that's something that I hold that value pretty steadfast in my life. Really, I don't think that outside influences are something that someone can use as an excuse for their poor behavior. But on the
you believe in personal responsibility, which is like non-existent anymore.
Shocker, right? But at the same time, people have a moral obligation to not say these things and not do these things. And especially, violent talk, inciting violent talk, I can see how that's definitely should be legal. But to the extent of, if someone says, if someone's a part of a Facebook page called Terminate Republicans, it's up to Facebook if they want to take that page off or not. I don't think there should be any legal restraint there or restriction saying that page can't exist. But it is still 100% on him for going to the baseball field, for planning it out, pulling out an AR-15 and pulling the trigger.
Right.
So that's kind of...
I think it'd be completely disingenuous to blame it on anything but him. And I think what we're getting at is yes, words are powerful, but they're not like the end all be all of making people do things.
Exactly.
And we've talked about the craziness, and I think we've been a little bit responsible of it in some instances too. But like I'm trying to think of how to say it. So it's a lot of it did start in the campaign, right? The last presidential campaign. Both groups demonized the other group so much that it became normal now to do that continually.
Yeah.
And with the how influential specific people are and how these words get used, and then the label gets attached, and then you're just attacking the label and not the person. It's really damaging, and it's really important, I think, that these congressmen and people that are in the public eye, I think they have a bigger responsibility to watch their tongue than the people on Facebook. I think that it's important when they're speaking to not use words like, we need to destroy this, or help me with my attack on Democrats. Like that, I don't think you're benefiting. Like, using that word isn't benefiting you in any real way other than demonizing the other group and having people on board because it's a aggressive word. Like you could just say, I want my legislation to go through. I mean, like it changes
Exactly.
the tone of the conversation, like from being aggressive and hostile to more civil and conversational, which is where it should be. And I think it's kind of just been building up over time, and it kind of peaked with this last election.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it further into that article that we have posted in the description that we're talking about, in his research, he even found out that words like attack and war and stuff like that, when used in a political sense, don't really hold much weight anymore to people. It doesn't really even trigger them. So what do you have to do? You have to escalate it even more to them to then, get people in on it and to grab people's attention. But I think you're exactly right. When we saw that clip of Paul Ryan, he was talking about, they are our leaders. We elected them to represent, to lead us. And it is, it starts with them not using this vitriolic language and stuff like that. But the responsibility ultimately falls on us as people, as the citizens of the United States, to also not fall into the trap and be better than that. I mean, there's an article that I just read the other day. Is from NBC. You're going to put that in the description as well. But it talks about how I think it was 54% of Democrats fear the Republican Party and 49% of Republicans fear the Democratic Party, right? So, I mean, you have two major parties. Most people in America associate themselves with one of these parties, and almost half in both cases are fearful of the other party, and that's a problem.
That is because also I think it's a really good exercise, speaking of that, and something that I've been trying to do, and it's actually kind of interesting because I hadn't really thought about it this way until recently, and then it's a good mental exercise is, for instance, I've been doing it a lot with Hillary because I just dislike her a lot, but
Yes.
trying to put myself in her shoes, in her thought process, and like, what if she doesn't, like, I think it's kind of crazy for me, and I think I'd come off of this sometimes, is like, I don't think she wants to destroy America, so I think that she might really want to help America. Maybe not even if she might want to, but like get in her shoes and be like, well, I'm so quick to write her off as like, oh, she hates America, and like, oh, she'd be the worst thing for this country. Well, maybe, like, I think that she likes America, and she's definitely thinks
Her
she's
vision
doing right.
is just completely different than yours, per se.
Right, and so it's like I've been taught, but I've been kind of brought up to like she's like the worst thing ever, and it's like, but she doesn't think she is, and she thinks what she's doing is right. And why am I so quick to say she's like horrible or whatever? Like, when she, like, what if I was just like, okay, well, what if I was her and I thought I was doing the right thing? How could I justify this thought process?
Yeah.
Instead of me saying, oh, she wants to do this to destroy America. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she thinks it will help. How does she see this as helping?
Yeah.
And trying to break down those barriers that have been built up through words and through Hillary and through what were some of the other ones in the presidential race that were against her? Like, the words that get used and you get normalized of Hillary. Like, like, what if she actually thinks that she's doing the right thing?
I think
how.
Go ahead.
Well, just like it's really hard. I've gotten a lot better, but it's kind of bizarre because I am so quick to write her off as wanting not to destroy America, but that all of her policies are pretty much horrible for this country. And it's like, but she thinks they're not. And why does she think that? And in her shoes, I think that she thinks the same thing I do. Like, I just want the best for this country, and she just wants the best for this country. But we have completely different visions on what that is.
Exactly.
But it's not like I get caught a lot of times just thinking that she's here to destroy America, when I don't think that's actually the reality, and I have to catch myself. And I think more people need to do that because, like you said, fearful of the other campaign group. Like,
That's
we
a little
shouldn't
crazy.
be fearful of other citizens of this country.
Yeah.
We should be a family first, and then we can squabble, and no one's going to agree on everything.
Absolutely.
But we shouldn't be fearful of anybody.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's a great exercise, and we've talked about two things can be true at once, right? She can think that what she's doing for America is the best at the same time, while we think that her ideas are total garbage and wouldn't work and would take us away from the founding of America and the principles of it. But that doesn't mean that she's Satan necessarily.
Yeah.
And Hillary Clinton isn't the best example because She's not. I'm not saying that, but she's done
Because
a
she's
lot
Satan. No, I'm
because
kidding.
she's Satan. No, I'm just saying. But just I think it's really important to do this with pretty much anyone who you find that you strongly disagree with. Separate the person from the policy and attack the policy, not the person per se. If the person does something, that's personally, terrible or disgusting, say Bill Clinton, then, you can attack the actions that he does. But I think that everyone would be better off if you take a second, step back, do that exercise, put yourself in their shoes, and then you can approach it from just a much wider thought process, right? And then you'll be able to have more cohesive points on what you think, and then you can attack that policy or whatever they're saying much better than saying, this person is terrible, this person should be in prison, whatever it may be. It leads to a much better discussion, and it's going to kind of open the field up to really kind of unify with the people in the middle, because I truly believe on 10% of the left and 10% of the right, 11% on the left, 10% on the right. No, I'm just kidding. Those people are just insane, and the rest in the middle really do, have differences of opinions, but there's common ground that you can come together on. You know what I mean? And they don't want to see anybody violently injured because of their beliefs.
And we both want the same thing. Like, I think some of the far left people are nuts, and not even far left Democrats kind of have crazy ideas, but they want what's best for this country. We just have different ideas on what's best. But that's like, it shouldn't be a fear thing. Like, it shouldn't be fearful. It should just be, well, why don't we talk and kind of figure out why you think that this would actually help, and why I think this would actually help and yours wouldn't. It's and so I think it's interesting. We didn't come off as coming off like definitely words don't mean anything. I think that was maybe what people might have thought we would go, is that words really, people are responsible, and words are definitely powerful, but they should not be ever censored. People just need to be more responsible in what they do with them and what they use. And that it's just so bizarre that some words have become worthless. And also, words change meanings all the time. It's bizarre. Words are very interesting, I think, to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
I think they're so fascinating.
You're totally right, and I think that it's really a shame how they've completely lost value and meaning in a lot of cases, and it's really sad. And
they've had to go to such far extremes now to make the same point you could have made with much more moderate words not even 30 years ago.
Well, because over decades and decades of this kind of inflammatory language, what you have to top it with the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and then before you know it, you're calling everyone a racist.
Right, and you might think that you're just going a little bit more than the last one, but then maybe someone else has a different view of that word, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's saying defeat and fight, we have to go to war. And it's like, again, they're responsible for their actions, but you also need to understand how your words could be interpreted, and it's up to you to realize that maybe I shouldn't use that word if it's not the best, Maybe that's not a good idea.
I agree with you.
Okay,
I agree. I think everyone would do much better to go ahead. What's your point?
To just speak less.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say to kind of think about what they're saying first. But then obviously I want to emphasize, I really do think that the ultimate responsibility is on the person, right? Because if everyone has to think about, oh, how is this person going to take this? I'm not advocating that or anything, but it's obvious if you're saying this person is a terrorist or this person is this person is a racist, you obviously shouldn't say those things without severe proof, because those are big accusations to make.
They should be big accusations, exactly. Yeah. One last thing is, it's actually interesting we talk about this week, because I just finished finally reading, not finally, like it took me a long time, but I finally got around to reading in 1984, which people have been talking about, and I know I'm old, I'm very late to the party on this book, but it was really fascinating. Is in the book, I don't know if you haven't read it, it's awesome, but it's a Big Brother world, total surveillance, no freedom. But in the book they talk about crafting a new dictionary. Because the people in power realize how important words are. And they talk about how by crafting a new dictionary and new words for people to use, they would cut out words that could possibly inspire revolution or distaste for where they are. Like, by creating a new dictionary and restricting what words are used, they can completely control the population. And that was very interesting, because it's like, that's actually kind of scarily true. Like, if we just weren't allowed to use words like rebel or words like hate, if they were just cut out and not allowed to be said, people would forget that they existed. They would forget how to think that. And it's very scary that these words, they are very powerful. And I think it's cool in the book. George Orwellian talks about it, and how like this overarching big brother that they use in the book, they're trying to craft a new dictionary and cut out words. And so they would just completely control the population, because once that's achieved, no one could ever be upset.
Yeah.
And so I think, I mean, that's obviously super extreme and not even in the really conversation right now, that happening. But we shouldn't take any steps towards that in restricting free speech, in restricting words, because words are the ultimate freedom. You know, the freedom to think how we want to think, to say what we want to say, to
express
how we want to say it. But with that freedom comes responsibility in what we say and how it's going to be interpreted.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Definitely no legislation or anything like that. But like you said, we have a moral responsibility to really understand the words and the language that we are using, because they do have an impact on people. And we didn't touch on it much, but like there's a lot of people that, like this guy who did the shootings, clearly insane, right? He has a mental disability. Something's going on. Maybe political rhetoric, violent speak, or words like that push him to the brink and push him over the edge. And while I'm not going to blame people for their deaths who have said these things, for that he went and then did that action, I'm not saying that it's their fault or that they should be held responsible for it, but you know, maybe look in the mirror and say, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And if you're not part of the solution, then, you know, maybe it's just best not to say anything at all.
Or just think twice when you're thinking, before you say something crazy or accuse someone of something, just be like, well, maybe.
And if you want to go out and call someone a racist and you know, be inflammatory, then by all means go for it. And that's just,
we will call you an idiot.
We will call you an idiot. And yeah, exactly. But yeah, guys, tell us what you think in the comment section below. Are we crazy? Are we not? We're not. Anyways, but that is going to wrap up our main topic this week, guys. And we're going to move right into what triggered us this week. All right, guys, we are back in the final section of this week's podcast. Of course, this is the What Triggered Us section, the part where we put aside all rational and reasonable thinking and replace it only with emotion. And Seth, what got you triggered this week?
Yeah, speaking of words, my triggered is about the use of the term radical Islamic terrorism. And specifically, Fox News host went through and went around asking college students, it looked like they did around D.C., if using the term radical Islamic terrorists is too offensive, you know? And here is what some of the students had to say.
Do you think we should be using the word radical Islam in talking about ISIS, or do you think that term may be too offensive to use and could offend people too much?
No, that's definitely wrong.
It might be on the more offensive side.
There's been domestic terrorism with like Christian groups, for example, and like you don't really call them, you don't go around saying like radical Christianism or radical Catholic, things like that, right?
Which attacks would those be?
I can't name them from the top of my head, but I know that. Trying to think, there's like certain like churches. I can't name any of them, but from the top of my head.
Really, like, most of the people who are saying we can't say radical Islamic terrorism also don't want to acknowledge that there's a radical wing of the Islam religion.
I just don't really like grouping people into that and kind of singling out Islam as a violent religion.
Hey, you think of the KKK and they're a Christian organization. Would you call them radical Christians?
It's not people killing others in the name of Christianity or killing people in the name of atheism. It is a seemingly unique problem to Islam. By not addressing the threat as radical Islam, which it is, you're not actually going to get anywhere in defeating it. What's your response to that?
Focusing more on a acceptance and rehabilitation of extremist groups, kind of figuring out why they're extremists. There's like
very strong, deep-seated fear in the United States that's often, in my opinion, irrational.
So apparently it is.
Wow.
By pretty much all accounts, and that we should focus on a more acceptance and rehabilitation tactic when dealing with extremist groups.
Oh, totally.
Like, blows my mind that these are the kids coming out of colleges these days that
the future
are unable to label something what it calls itself. Like, they call themselves Islam. They call themselves radicals. Like, jihad. Like, I don't understand why there's just fear. And the one girl even says, like, well, Americans have this irrational fear. I think it's bad to label them that. Well, it's not irrational when they kill thousands of people. I don't understand. It's not irrational.
No.
And they've said that they're going to fight pretty much all of Western civilization because it's opposed to Sharia law and the parts of Islam that they are bring forward. And it's like, I don't think that's irrational, and I don't think that it's too offensive of a word because it's literally what it is.
Absolutely.
And blows my mind. We've talked about this before. You have to be able to label it so we can talk about it, so it can be defeated, because you can't defeat something you don't know what it is.
Exactly. And this is not an instance of labeling something or using terms that are inflammatory or unjustified. This is absolutely justified and should be put there. I mean, we just talked about Ramadan on the previous podcast, and you you had over 1,500, almost 2,000 people were killed last month alone, and thousands more wounded.
That's not much. I mean, come on, Jared. There's
in
Christian
30
groups,
days. There are. I totally forgot.
Christian groups that kill people.
Yeah, the radical
that the
Christianity group that the girl mentioned. Yeah, that killed thousands of people last month. Totally forgot to mention them, or any other religion, by the way. But it's just the more if you can't name the problem, if you continue to deny reality, nothing will ever change. Nothing will get fixed. And one day you will wake up in a rude awakening, my friend.
Yeah. I wish you could just bundle them all up and just send them over to the Middle East for a little bit. I'd love to go too, because honestly, I don't know. I haven't been over there. I don't know if I'd love to go. Let me take it back. I don't love to go.
Say, really?
But no, but like I would just go over there, and it's like they literally think this coming out of school, man. I don't understand.
Yeah, well, don't bundle up any gay people and put them over there, because they'll probably get thrown off of a rooftop. So.
Yeah, right after they protest
might,
for
exactly. They might be against it then, but probably not. All right. Well,
what about you, bro?
I think this is almost equally as insane. Here we have a mom did a Instagram post. Her name is Nisha Moodley. She's the mother of 6-month-old Raven. And she said this on her Instagram page. She said, since the moment he was born, we've always asked before we pick him up. I always feel for his yes. Why? Because we want him to know that it is his body, and that others' bodies are theirs, and that no one gets to make choices about someone else's body. Of course. And she continues to go on, if you ever want to hold someone else's baby, my suggestion to you is to ask the parent and then ask the kid. It always touches my heart to hear someone that takes a moment to connect with him and say, "Can I hold you, dude?"
What is wrong with society, dude?
This is insane. This is insane. This is insane. This is insane. It's
too far, dude.
It's
too far.
Too far. You don't ask a kid. This is not how parenting should go, okay? If you think that parenting has gotten better, if you think that our generation is better disciplined than before, then by all means, ask your 6-month-old baby if you can hold him. Okay,
I feel for his yes. What does that mean? You're basically like you're just gonna whatever.
What else are you gonna do later on in life? Are you gonna ask him, please, will you pick up your room? And if he says no, then no, because it's his body and you can't force him to do anything. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's insane. Parents have to show they are the authority. They are the authoritarian in the relationship. The kids have to respect them and do what they say. It's not a, hey, can I pick you up? It's just, I'm picking you. Like, it's done. I picked you up.
Like, what happens when you ask the kid, can I feed you? And they're like, no. And then they like starve because like they said no too often. I didn't feel the yes.
Then you let them die.
I didn't want to.
You did not feel the yes. You must.
I love the hashtags too. Hashtag born free.
God, what does that even mean?
Nuts, man.
What is he free from?
I don't even know.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure he's completely dependent on you.
Is teaching a 6-month-old baby that someone else's body is their own the most important thing? Like maybe walking, that's kind of important. Or eating,
maybe burping, which you'd have to pick them
maybe
up.
Burping. Like it seems a little bit more important than teaching them your political agenda at 6 months old. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and not only that, they literally can't respond.
Yeah.
So
what are they gonna do? Yes,
I feel for his
yes. You can hold me. It's insane.
Whatever.
I don't.
It's kind of insane that she's like, because I want him to know that his body's his. I don't think he's 6 months old. He's not gonna know anything from that. He's going to be like, yeah, it took my mom forever to pick me up.
Are you telling
She'd,
me
like,
that
say
at
something
6
to
months, if your mom asked you that, you wouldn't get out of that, oh, my mom is trying to teach me that my body is mine and that other people's body are theirs?
I think he might actually be offended because she said because we want him. Did she just assume his gender?
Yeah, he could
because
be whatever
at 6
he
months,
wants.
maybe he's not a dude.
Maybe he's not.
You know?
That's a wow.
Right?
That's a good point. I'm even more triggered than I already was at the beginning of this section.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys, that is going to bring us to an end of this week's Peanut Gallery podcast. As always, if you like this video, like it, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out. Always be sure and follow us on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Google Play. Leave us a review there. And until we see you guys next week, always remember, stay informed.